The next project I'm going to be doing on the Interceptor is installing light bars. I was deciding between doing one long light bar and I ended up going with the two smaller light bars. Now these are something that I've been selling for a long time. I use them for a lot of different vehicles, but I am going to use them for here because in Alaska we get a lot of moose that stand on the side of the roads. A lot of places, you know, like when I was in Utah, we'd get deer doing the same thing. So the nice thing about these is that you can mount them and you can adjust them to turn, you know, this way to the side and this way to the side, and that way I can adjust the pattern as needed and point to the sides of the roads rather than just forward. So the other thing, if you do use them just straight forward, I mean, they are really bright. These are 3,000 lumens a piece, so you're adding 6,000 lumens to your lights, and they have projectors, which is really nice. And whereas a lot of the cheap eBay ones, sometimes they have projectors, but usually they're not more than 1,500 lumens for the cheap ones. Also, I've noticed that the cheap ones really, they leak a lot. And so you'll end up with a lot of humidity inside of here, and that shortens the life, and then it also affects the light output, and it just looks crappy. So anyway, this is what I'm going to be using. I'll have these for sale on the website. You can buy the 2-pack if you want, but this guide is pretty much just for any light bar you want, so you don't have to buy these. But I've tried and tested these for a long time, and they're my favorite light bar by far. I think they just have really good look. Anyway, so there's two ways to mount these. The kit comes with the L brackets on the side, so you can mount them, you know, just literally anywhere. Or in this application, I'm going to use the center mount, and it slides along this rail. So you just loosen these two Allen bolts, and it will just slide anywhere you want, which is really nice because if I were to center this, it's going to hit here on the left. So I'm actually going to flip this around so that the hole is a little bit further forward, and then I'm going to mount it up there and kind of recessed inside with the mount over to the side. So it'll look like something like that. And then of course I'm gonna have to tuck the wire. Let's see, there. It looks something like that, but then I'll run the wires. And so it'll be a little bit more low profile, and then I'll kind of tilt them outwards as needed. If you don't like the logo on these, you can just flip them and use the other side. In my instance, it won't really matter too much because it's going to be tucked in there pretty good. But so that's just going to be mounting them. It's going to be real easy to do the wiring because the Interceptors are set up with the steering wheel controls. And so we're just going to run a single positive wire all the way to the center console stack, which is where we have our fuse box that we installed in a former video. When it comes to running the wires, there's a few options depending on which Interceptor you have. I've been told that if you are 16, I think it's 2016 or newer, might be 17 and newer, but if it's, there's a hole down here. This one does not have it because this is a 13. So up here underneath the glove box, so here's the blower motor, and then go to the right, and then way to the back, you'll see this hose. This is a drain hose. Back here next to the drain hose, I believe on some of these models, there's a hole with a grommet for passing wires through. But like I said, that's definitely not in the 2011 to 15. And either in 16 or 17, they started doing that. That's what I've been told. I haven't seen one firsthand yet. But this is a 2013, so we got to go somewhere else. So one option you can do as well is if you pop off this kick pad that sits on the carpet here, and then pop up this trim, you'll see underneath is that there is a big heavy-duty grommet that's holding the e-brake cable in. I would avoid cutting this, but if you want, you could puncture a hole and run a wire through it. Just don't mess with the e-brake cable itself. Don't run zip ties anywhere that it's the exposed unsheathed cable, or else it could restrict your use of the e-brake. But the e-brake's going back, and so you would be putting the wire in and going forward. And then it would just kind of be dangling underneath the vehicle for a couple feet before it goes up into the engine bay. But it's really tight in the engine bay. If you had this up on a lift, it would be a lot easier to run, or at least on jacks, you know, that you could run the wire a little bit better without getting it somewhere you don't want it. You definitely want to use a lot of zip ties if you're going to run under the body of the vehicle, just to make sure nothing drags and gets snagged up, or, you know, rubs on bare metal, shorts out, could start a fire, something like that. Just be smart when you're running electrical. Another thing is, if underneath this seat, if you come under the car, there is a grommet right there, and so you can run a wire there too. But once again, you know, you're going to be running underneath the vehicle, and there's not a lot of places to fasten zip ties, because you don't really, like, that's the unsheathed parts of the e-brake. You don't want to, you know, be zip tying stuff to that unsheathed stuff. Where it's covered, you can zip tie to that, no problem, but I just like to keep wires away from that. But I'll show you where we're going to run on this vehicle. I can't vouch that it's going to be the same on your vehicle, but if it is, I'd highly recommend doing it this next way. Okay, so looking behind the battery, the engine bay, maybe kind of difficult to see on here. There is a hole right there that the police used to run wires in the past. Try to get to focus for you. Now, it's kind of easy to see from the engine bay, although it's not focusing for you. But if you crawl underneath the dash, it's like really difficult to see. So, to help identify it, I'm gonna stick my light, something like that. And then we're gonna go inside and crawl up, contort our back in a uncomfortable position, and see if we can see some light. There it is. See, now it's much easier to see with the light on there. So I'm not sure if they drilled this hole, because it kind of looks like that's what they did. It's all torn up around there. But you know, if they ran wires before, there's probably holes left from wherever any modifications were. This hole might have already been here, but from what I found online, a lot of people are saying there's not any, you know, factory pass-throughs. It kind of looks like jagged metal from here. Anyway, that's where we're going to be running the wire. So now what we've got here is just, I think it's 16 or 14 gauge wire. Let's see, 14 gauge wire, and we only need one, just one hot wire, because we are going to just do a ground to frame. What we're gonna do here is, I wasn't quite sure how much wire I'd need, so I just took, I don't know, 12 feet, probably more than that. And I've already put my connectors crimped on there and shrink wrapped. So starting with the short end, so the bare end right here, I'm just gonna feed this through that hole in the firewall. And then at that point I can start running all my cable to the front, and then I'll take whatever slack I have left and pull it through the firewall, bundle it, and then, well, I'll run it to where it's gonna be mounted to my fuse box underneath my center console, which I showed that in another video. And then we'll bundle the excess. All right, so relatively painlessly, we've got our wire now ran up from that access hole, thanks to the Police Department of Wasilla, Alaska. Coming up, and I put it in this corrugated sheathing for anywhere that's running outside of the cab, just so if it's rubbing on things or exposed to heat and dirt and all that stuff. This is the slack that I'm gonna pull out of after it's all wired up. I'll tighten this all up, and then I just went down here, kind of between the headlight area and the battery and air box, and went down to the, to the right of it, or I guess left if you're sitting in the vehicle. And then it goes straight down, and then down through here, and then I routed it into this grill area. Now, when you're running this, make sure you're not rubbing on any moving parts, exhaust, definitely keep it away from anything like suspension, steering, all that stuff. And then also right here is the fan. So I went to the side of the fan. Just don't get in front of the fan or else you're gonna end up with a real mess. So that's pretty much it as far as running the wiring. I'm gonna run a ground. I need to find where I'm gonna do that. I'm sure they've probably got grounds tapped off all over the place in here from all the police equipment, but if nothing else, I'll just run a ground to here. So the next step would be to mount the lights up and get them all aimed and everything, so I know how long my extra cord needs to be. Okay, so we've got it all mounted up. You can see I've kind of had them on a slight kilt, pointing outwards, so they point slightly bit off to the side of the road rather than just straight ahead. And that's intentional, so I can see wildlife on the side of the road. Then I've got my wiring harnesses fed through, so I've got my 2 positives. This is what's going to the cab. Each of these are going to the light bar. And then these underneath here are just spade connectors that I shrink wrapped, and these are going to the negative. Now the negative I have running through here along the back side. There's some little 8mm bolts on this valence that if you remove, it makes it a lot easier to pull this down to run wiring. And then I fished it up through here. It's that cable right there, coming up underneath the headlight. And then I found a ground strap just right next to the, right behind the headlight. So I just tied it in right here. There's our ground strap right there. So I added that in. Now all I've got to do is I'm going to tuck these guys back into the grill. I just had them all coming through the same one, so I can just tuck it through. And then after that, we'll be moving inside, and it's all pretty easy from there. All right, so I've shown you how to do this several times, so I'm going to speed through it. But basically, it's just open up the console, pop off. Here, you can just leave this dangling because it's got the cigarette lighter wire in there, but it's just held on with these 2 clips. Then there's this 7mm. Now I'm going to run my wire up. All right, I'm going to clip off the wiring pretty good ways back because I don't need that much. And then I want to give myself a little extra wire so I have some room to kind of maneuver in here. So that gives me plenty. Now we need to add in a relay. The way we'll wire this is we have our relay. And the way it's currently set up is that any of these ports, so I've got 2 open right now, any of these ports, when the key is turned on, like these are powered on. The connection between the circuit. Now we don't want our light bar to turn on as our switch when it's tied in with the control wires for the steering wheel switches. So what that looks like is if you have one of these, you want a 4-pin relay with the harness. I'll put the link in the description for these ones. Sometimes the color coding's different, but I like these ones. So pretty much we're going to be pulling our power from the red wire. So we're going to put an eyelet. We'll just do these one at a time, so because it can get easy to get lost with all these wires. So we're gonna let me make sure that's gonna fit in there. I'm gonna have to use the smaller eyelet here. Make sure that fits. Okay. So we're gonna be pulling our power from the fuse box to the red. So we're gonna have an eyelet on this red wire. So this is gonna hook up to a fuse, this one right here, which we'll need to add a fuse in. And then, so this is the power coming in. This blue one is the power going out. So this is going to be going to our red wire right here. So I will just need to get a some sort of a connector, or I could just splice these in, but I kind of like having a connector. I'll see what I have up in the shop and then I'll bring it down. So we're going to splice these together, and then this black wire is getting grounded, so it's going to one of these, and then this one is being butt connected into our 14 pin connector right here. If you can see that, there's 4 wires in here, and I'm lucky to have this harness, which gives me the diagram here. So if you're using switch button 1, auxiliary 1 on the steering wheel, it's gray brown. Steering wheel button 2 is white violet, or like white purple. Then 3 is green brown, and then 4 is yellow gray. So we're gonna just do number 1, and so that is gray brown, which is what is it, the second wire? Yeah, it's the second wire on the clip side. So I'm going to run in and get my crimps and everything I need, and then I'll be back, and we'll put T-taps on there and get this sucker wired up. Okay, so one thing I forgot about, which I do talk about in the auxiliary steering wheel aux wiring video, is that the wires that go to the auxiliary buttons are negatively switched. So I had told you wrong previously. These were still correct, but these are flipped. So you would think that normally the black would be grounded on here, and then this would go to the wire, or sorry, the white would go to the wire because it's positive. But since it's negatively switched, we reverse that. So this is going to splice into the gray brown wire that goes to the button control on the steering wheel. And this is the power for the relay. So it's going to be, I'm just going to stack it on these and they'll be on the same circuit. Something like that. And I'll just use this open slot I have here. So if you have questions about that, you can go look at the other video on how to wire this. But first thing I'm going to do is splice these together. So okay, got a little crispy there. All right. Now we're going to find our wire, which is, it's kind of hard to see, probably for you. But I'm going to disconnect that for a second. If you have the other harness, this would be a lot easier, like the pigtail like I have for this one, but I don't have it for the 14 pin, just for the 6 pin. So this red one's the one I installed. And so now this is tapped into the steering wheel control. And we're gonna take our black, we're just gonna plug it in. Careful with these spades, because a lot of times what happens is when you crimp them, they like to bend down and then it'll slide over the top. So I just get my fingernail in there and center it, the terminal. Because you'll plug it in and it feels like it plugs in, and then you won't get any power and you'll be wondering what's going on and waste a lot of time trying to figure that out. If you look at both sides, you can make sure that you see red on both sides of the terminal. Make sure it's fully seated right. Okay. So I'm going to put this 20 amp fuse in. And then we're going to test to make sure it works. So you can hear it. Just right off the bat, we can tell we wired up the fuse right, because you can hear the, let me turn this off. You can hear the click, right? And then if I show you what it looks like on the dash, you can listen. So we've got our so that's what you want. So now I'm going to put this double-sided tape and mount it down kind of in the right spot there. And then I'm going to do all my wire management, get everything tucked away where it should be. You want to avoid as much wire congestion in here as possible, just because this whole upper front pocket area has to have space. You run into issues if you get it all too pinched in there. One thing I'll mention is that I noticed that I had originally tucked this guy back down in there in a previous video, and I realized that my remote start and like locking and unlocking was really hit and miss when I did that. So I think it's because I buried it so much. This unit on center consoles is usually, in fact this one probably has one underneath the center console, but it's pretty unobstructed as far as, you know, not being buried by all this stuff. It's just located in the underside. However, I did notice, so I have an F-150 2011, and I installed previously a remote start kit, which involves installing an antenna. And I looked at that plug right there, and I said, geez, that sure looks like the one I installed my F-150 from the factory. It was a factory kit because my truck didn't normally come with it. So I just installed it and enabled it on ForeScan on my truck. And so I went and pulled the antenna and plugged it in, and it popped right in. So I think if I buy, I looked up and you can buy these extra long range antennas for the Explorer, but they're kind of expensive. I think that I can just use the F-150 one, which I believe is a bit cheaper. So I'm going to be looking into that and trying to see if I can get some really good range out of the remote. So keep your eye open for that video. If I can get that all worked out, it might be a while, but in the meantime, if you look up 2009 to 2014 F-150 remote start antenna, I believe that's the guy that you want for that. But I'll do some research on that, and then you could just mount it somewhere in here or up under the dash or wherever. But anyway, so in the meantime, I'm not going to bury it as deep as I did. Hopefully get better range, and then I will show you once I get this all cleaned up. All right, so we're out here getting ready to test this. So I've got my headlights turned off, so we got a good comparison. And then there's our switch right there. And there we go. So the camera I don't think really does it justice, but they turn out pretty good. They're pretty bright, especially for how small they are. So they're 3,000 lumens apiece. I have them tilted outwards to more point to the sides of the road. So that's them with just the light bars. So anyway, overall I think pretty good. You can, put these all over different angles, reverse lights, whatever. I like them a lot. I may down the road add another bigger light bar in the middle and then tilt these ones even more outwards. But for now, I think this is gonna work pretty good. Hopefully this helps. If you want these lights, I've got them up for sale on my website, 3w200.com. But this tutorial will, be just as equally useful for any kind of light bar you're using. Thanks for watching.